back. So in the previous video, we presented the game scene, which we have here inside a SwiftUI view. Now we're basically going to be working exclusively within SpriteKit and this game scene. So you can actually ignore the content view for now, and we're actually going to start to create some sprites for this game. So what we're going to do first is to create a function to create our alien. And this function is going to have a couple of parameters. We're going to have the position, which will be a CG point. And we're also going to have the color, which will be a UI color. Okay, so that means every time I call this function, create alien, for example, if I call it in my did move, I will need to define a point, which is an X and Y coordinate. Let's say 0, 0. And I'll need to define a color. So you can do UI color dot green. We can also shorten that and just put dot green. It infers that it's part of the UI color because we know that it needs to be defined as UI color. Okay, so we have our function and we know that that's how we call it, and we can call that within our main method. So as soon as we load up our game, the did move will be called and we'll create that alien. So we'll create our alien, and our alien will be an SKSpriteNode. Hopefully you have completed the introduction unit, so you know a little bit about how to create sprites and how to manipulate them. We're now going to focus on creating this Space Invaders game. So I need to also define the size, which of course is a CG size with a width and a height. If you don't have a width and a height for your sprite, then it'll make it difficult when we have to play with physics bodies. So make sure you do have that in place. So the color, instead of doing UI color, we're actually going to pass this down from our parameters. We'll use the British spelling of color, which will pass down that value into our alien here. Our position, again, will be passed down from our position. I wrote POS just because it's a little bit shorter. And I'm also going to give my alien a name because sometimes it makes it easier to detect which sprite we're dealing with if we know what type it is from its name. Okay, so those are the basic properties. The next thing I need to do is to add the physics properties. So my alien physics body, this was saying before, if we didn't have this size defined, it's going to be difficult to define a physics body. So that will be my alien dot frame dot size. Okay, so if I have an alien which is 50 by 50. Basically what we're saying is the physics property that goes around it. So if you want your collisions to be off a slightly bit, perhaps you have an alien with a force field around it, you could increase this frame so that the collision doesn't actually happen directly with the border of the color. Okay, so we're going to say it's not dynamic, which means it won't be manipulated by mass. So if two objects collide, we don't want it to be bumped further if it's a smaller object. That's what is dynamic is. We of course don't want it to be affected by gravity because in space there is no gravity, so we'll keep that as false. We do want to use our precision detection because we are going to do some collision detection later on. Okay, so that's our alien now set up. The next thing we need to do is to actually add it to our scene. So we've defined it, we haven't actually added it. So self dot add child, and then we can add in our alien. Okay, so from now, if I call my alien, I'm going to put it at 0, 0. So let's give this a little test and run it, and my alien should be green as well. Okay, so it's currently sitting down there at 0, 0. So we want to move it up a lot. So let's move it up 500 and let's shift it in a little bit as well. So I'll run my game again. Okay, you can see my alien is there. He's a little bit big. We can manipulate the size. 25, 25, make it half the size. Okay, and now I have my alien. So the next thing we need to do is make our alien actually move like an alien in Space Invaders. So let's do that now. We can add some animations. Again, if you're not familiar with this, I would encourage you to look at my introduction to SpriteKit, where we start to explore some of these things a little bit slower. I tried to make that unit as a reference unit so you could refer back to it. The videos are nice and short in case you unfamiliar with sequencing actions or something like that. Okay, so then we define the destination X and the destination Y, and also need to say how long is it going to take for it to actually get there. Okay, so it's going to move right, then it's going to move left. Of course, when it moves left, it moves the opposite way, so we'll make that a negative. It will take the same amount of time. Then we're going to make it move down. Okay, and for this one, we're not going to move the x-axis, we're just going to move it down and make sure it moves down more than the height, otherwise it will collide once we have multiple rows. So we're going to do that, and we'll change the duration to 0.5 so it moves down a little bit quicker. So ignore these yellow errors for now. These are just telling you that you've created this function, this property, but it's not being used yet. So we need to use this. That's why it's giving this error. It's saying you don't actually need to use this referred name. You can replace that with an underscore, but we don't want to do that. Okay, the next action we're going to create is a wait. And this is just a duration of how long we want to wait for before we perform the next action. Okay, now we can sequence these all together. So we'll make a sequence. Of course, you could put these all together into one long line of code, but obviously on purpose, I've put this together so that we separate them out so you can see what each of these movements are. Okay, so I'm going to move right, then it will move down, then it will move left, then it will move down, and then we'll wait a little bit. Okay, so we have our sequence of our actions. We used all of these here, so these errors will now disappear. We haven't used sequence, which is now why we have another error. So we're going to repeat this sequence. I'm going to repeat that forever. And the last thing we need to do is to run this action. So I'll now run my application, and I can see my alien moving across the screen. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. We may need to increase this a lot as well. So let's make that 300 and 300, just to make sure that it moves further across the screen. Of course, this will be a little bit faster, so we may need to also adjust that duration as well, but I'm going to leave that up to you to have a little play with that. So that is creating our alien.